On my wedding day, my cruel brother treated me like a stepsister, while my greedy sister-in-law demanded my $20,000 diamond necklace. When I refused, my brother slapped me hard, yelling, "How dare you refuse?" To my shock, my parents sided with him. Heartbroken and furious, I left, but I had a plan. The very next day, I gave them a shocking surprise that changed everything, and now they're behind bars. You won't believe what happened next. My name is Maya, and if you're wondering where to start, I suppose it all begins back in Chicago, in a house that was never quite mine, though I lived there all my life. It was a house full of laughter and fights, warmth and neglect, with two parents, Richard and Sandra, and an older brother, Ethan. From the outside, we seemed like the perfect family, but behind closed doors, it was always clear who the favorite was. I was the second child, but to be honest, it felt like I was invisible most of the time. Ethan, my older brother, could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. They treated him like he was the golden child. He was their pride and joy, the one they focused on. I, on the other hand, had to carve my own path, not because I was independent or strong, but because I was often ignored. He would come home with his report cards, glowing with praise from our parents, and I would get a quick pat on the back and a "good job" that was said more out of obligation than genuine pride. We weren't a rich family, but my father, Richard, did well enough running a small business after getting his degree in business. He was proud of his accomplishments and always made sure Ethan knew he was the heir to everything. I can still remember the day Ethan graduated high school. My dad walked up to him, ruffled his hair, and handed him a shiny new car with a smile that lit up his face. Ethan was the oldest, and he was their future. When it came time for me to graduate high school, I expected something similar. Maybe not a car, but something to show that my hard work had mattered. Instead, I got a card and a promise from my parents that they would help me with college. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being treated as second best. My parents believed that daughters were only temporary members of the family. Once we married, we were supposed to move out and into our husband's world. Ethan, on the other hand, had their full attention. To them, he was the one who would continue the family legacy. So I left. I left to chase something for myself, something that wasn't tied to my parents' expectations. I went to New York for college, determined to make something of myself, and to show them I wasn't just the overlooked daughter. I worked hard. I studied business administration, and I found a part-time job to help pay my way. It wasn't easy, and there were nights when I wondered if it was all worth it. But every time I thought of going home, I remembered how they treated me, how I was always second to Ethan, and I pushed forward. Every now and then, my parents would call. They were never really great at keeping in touch, but they'd call just enough to remind me I was their daughter, even though they didn't really show it. Ethan, however, was another story. My mom and dad constantly talked about him. I heard about his progress at the company my dad ran, how he was going to be the next big thing. They'd always talk about him like he was destined for greatness. It hurt, but I tried not to let it show. Then came the day that changed everything. Ethan called me one evening, his voice full of excitement. "Maya," he said, "I'm engaged." I couldn't hide my surprise. Ethan had been dating Chloe for a while, and while I didn't know her well, I had always felt something off about her. She was from a wealthy family, and she seemed to love Ethan only for his wealth. But Ethan was head over heels in love. He didn't see it, but I did. I remember the first time I met Chloe. She was everything I wasn't. Beautiful, polished, and so clearly aware of her own power. I tried to be polite, but I could already tell she was the type of woman who thought she could control everything around her, including Ethan. And she did. The wedding day arrived, and I wasn't thrilled to be part of it. But of course, I was family, so I went. The ceremony was beautiful, and the guests were all high society, people from all over who were there to witness the joining of two powerful families. I stood in the back, feeling like an outsider, but I kept my mouth shut. That was always the rule in my family. Stay quiet, stay out of the way. It wasn't until later in the day that everything changed. As the ceremony came to an end, I made my way toward the stage, still trying to find my place in the celebration. But as soon as Chloe saw me, she fixed me with a cold, calculating look. "Maya," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "What are you wearing?" "This is a wedding, not a funeral." I froze. The headache that had been nagging me for hours was now growing sharper, but Chloe's words made everything worse. I hadn't expected to be criticized. Not today, not by her. I didn't say anything, though. I knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing ever did. She wasn't done. As if she hadn't already humiliated me in front of the guests, Chloe smirked and demanded, "You should sing something for us. A song." "Go on, Maya," entertain the guests. "It's what you're here for, isn't it?" I couldn't believe it. My head throbbed, and every part of me wanted to say something sharp in return, but I didn't. Not then. I simply shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't. I'm not feeling well." Chloe wasn't having any of it. Her eyes narrowed, and in front of everyone, she demanded, "Then give me a gift. A big one. How about a $20,000 diamond necklace? Something worthy of this occasion." It was as if she'd slapped me across the face, her words cutting through the thin veil of politeness I had been holding on to. I stood there, trying to process the absurdity of her demand, but my brother, my own brother, stepped in then. Without hesitation, he turned to me and, in front of everyone, slapped me hard across the face. "Why did you refuse my wife?" he demanded, his voice full of anger. "You've embarrassed us all." I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. Ethan stood by Chloe, his eyes filled with disbelief, as if I had done something wrong. And my parents, they just stood there, silently supporting Ethan. I felt humiliated, and not just by Chloe and Ethan, but by my own parents who, as always, chose him over me. They ordered me to leave the house, and just like that, my place in their world vanished. So I left. I wasn't going to be anyone's second choice anymore. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. After I left my parents' house that night, I didn't know what to do or where to go. My whole world had collapsed in a matter of hours. The family I thought I knew had just sided with Chloe, a woman who didn't care about them, let alone me. The slap from Ethan, the words that stung like poison, and the cold, indifferent faces of my parents, it all hit me at once, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. I left the wedding early, barely managing to hold myself together. The tears that had been threatening to spill finally came once I got into my car. But I wasn't just crying for myself. I was crying for the family I thought I had, the family that had never seen me as anything more than a background character in Ethan's story. I went back to my apartment in New York, hoping that being away from everything would help. It didn't. The silence in my apartment was deafening. For days, I couldn't focus on anything. I just replayed the events over and over in my head. Ethan's slap, my parents' coldness, and Chloe's manipulation. How had it all come to this? How had my brother become so blind? And how had my parents, the same people who once raised me, become so willing to turn their backs on me? I felt betrayed in every way imaginable. But then something inside me snapped. I realized I didn't just want to walk away from this. I didn't just want to forget it. I wanted revenge. I wanted to expose Chloe for who she really was. It wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about taking control of my life, about making sure the truth came out. I couldn't do it alone, though. I needed help. And that's when I reached out to Rachel. Rachel was my closest friend from college. We'd shared everything over the years, our dreams, our disappointments, and everything in between. When I told her what had happened, she was furious. "Maya, you've got to do something. You can't let them get away with this," she said, her voice full of conviction. "I know you've always held back, but this time it's different." I knew Rachel was right, but how could I take action? Chloe had made me feel small and weak, but deep down I knew I wasn't either of those things. I had to find a way to fight back. Rachel helped me hire a private investigator. We knew we had to uncover the truth about Chloe, and fast. She wasn't just some spoiled woman who wanted attention. She was something much worse. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but I knew I had to know. I had to be sure of who she really was before I could expose her. For weeks, the investigator dug into Chloe's background. It wasn't easy. She was connected, wealthy, and well protected. But after what felt like forever, we finally got the information we needed. Chloe was involved in illegal activities, drug smuggling, fraud, and other shady dealings. Her wealth wasn't just from her family. She had built her empire on lies and manipulation. I could hardly believe it at first. The woman who had humiliated me and my family was a criminal. It was sickening to think that Ethan, my brother, had been blind to all of this. He didn't know, but he had to know now. I couldn't let her continue controlling him, or anyone for that matter. With the evidence in hand, I didn't waste any time. I contacted the authorities and handed over everything. The police started their investigation, and within a week, Chloe was arrested for fraud and drug-related crimes. It was a relief to see her face on the news, in handcuffs, being led away in front of a crowd. Finally, people would see her for who she really was. But even as the weight lifted off my shoulders, I couldn't forget the one thing that still haunted me, the fact that Ethan had no idea what was really happening. How could I tell him the truth? How could I make him see what I had been trying to tell him for so long? The shock came a few days after Chloe's arrest. Ethan called me. His voice was quieter than usual, and there was a hesitation I had never heard before. "Maya," he said, I don't know what to believe anymore. I've been so blind. She's been lying to me all along." For the first time in a long time, I heard the vulnerability in his voice. But it didn't make me feel better. The damage was done. Chloe had already torn everything apart. Ethan told me he was going to file for divorce. I didn't know whether to feel sorry for him or angry that it had taken this long for him to see the truth. And then, a few days later, something unexpected happened. Ethan showed up at my apartment. He stood there looking lost, almost as if he didn't know where to begin. "Maya," he said, his eyes meeting mine with genuine regret, "I'm so sorry. For everything. I didn't see it. I didn't see her for who she was. And I didn't see you either. I've been so caught up in my own world that I never paid attention to what you needed." I stared at him, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell him how much he'd hurt me. But another part, maybe the part that still loved him, despite everything, simply nodded. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope, one day, you can find it in your heart to forgive me." It was a start, but forgiveness wasn't going to come easy. Not yet. Even after Ethan's apology, something inside me had changed. I couldn't simply forgive him for everything that had happened. Not yet. The years of feeling invisible, the slap in front of everyone, and the way my parents had stood by him without hesitation, it was too much to just let go of in a few days. I needed space, time to process everything. But despite my anger, I wasn't the kind of person to hold grudges forever. I decided to go back to Chicago. Part of me wanted to rebuild with my family, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I wasn't sure if I could just pick up where we left off, or if things would ever be the same. But I felt this nagging pull, this desire to try, for the sake of everything we used to be. When I got back to Chicago, it wasn't just the city that had changed, it was my family. My parents, Richard and Sandra, were still the same in many ways. They had tried to cover up their mistakes, acting like nothing had happened. But I saw through it. They hadn't truly understood the depth of their mistake, nor had they fully grasped the pain I'd gone through. Still, I tried to make peace. For my sake, for theirs, and for the years we'd spent together before everything crumbled. Ethan, on the other hand, was different now. He looked older, like a man who'd been through a storm. His face had the same features, but his eyes were clouded with regret. He wasn't the proud, confident man he had once been. The weight of the truth had broken him, and though I could see that he was trying, I wasn't sure if it would ever be enough. It didn't take long for Ethan and me to start talking more. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding our relationship. But it was still fragile. The trust was gone, shattered by everything Chloe had done and the years of neglect I had endured. But we tried. I wanted to believe that we could heal, but I wasn't sure if I could ever fully trust him again. Then came the most unexpected moment. My parents, after everything that had happened, tried to make it right. They apologized for how they had treated me all these years and promised that they would do better. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. I could see that they were trying, and that meant something. But just when I thought I might start feeling like things could go back to normal, my phone rang one day. It was Rachel, and I could hear the panic in her voice. "Maya, you need to come over. There's something you need to know." I rushed to her place, already worried about what might be going on. When I arrived, Rachel didn't waste any time. "You won't believe this," she said, her hands trembling. "Chloe's out on bail. She's been using all her connections to turn the tables. She's spreading lies about you, Maya. She's telling everyone that you were the one behind all of this, that you're the reason everything fell apart." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Chloe was still fighting? She was still trying to destroy me, even after everything? My heart pounded in my chest. I had exposed her for what she truly was, and now she was turning it all back on me, trying to make me the villain in this story. Rachel looked at me with concern. "I'm really scared for you, Maya. People are starting to believe her. Even some of your family members are questioning everything." The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Chloe wasn't just trying to ruin Ethan's life. She was now after mine, too. She was manipulating everything, turning the truth into her own twisted narrative. I knew I couldn't let this go on. In that moment, I realized something. No matter what I had done, no matter what Ethan or my parents said, I was on my own in this. Chloe had already poisoned everything, and now it was my turn to fight back, for good. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The pressure that Chloe was putting on me was unbearable. She was no longer just a distant part of my past. Now, she was fighting to take everything from me. The lies she spread, the manipulations, everything she was doing, it felt like a battle I wasn't prepared for. But I wasn't about to let her win. Not after everything that had happened. The first thing I did was reach out to Rachel again. She was my support, my rock, and I knew I couldn't do this without her. Together, we came up with a plan. I couldn't just wait around and hope things would fix themselves. If Chloe was trying to destroy me, I needed to expose the truth, to clear my name once and for all. I started by gathering everything I could. The evidence from the investigator, all the police reports, and the things Chloe had said, anything that would prove she was lying. But it wasn't just about showing people Chloe's true colors anymore. It was about proving that my family, despite their mistakes, had a chance to be whole again. I couldn't fix everything, but I could fight for what was right. And then, everything shifted. It was one evening, after a long day of trying to gather more evidence and talking to lawyers, when my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw Ethan's name. I froze for a moment. I wasn't sure what to expect. We'd been talking a little, but it was never easy. He'd apologized, but I still wasn't sure how much I could trust him. I answered the phone, my voice quiet. "Ethan's?" "Maya," he said, sounding tired but determined. "I've made a decision. I know I've hurt you. I know I've made a mess of things, and I can't take it back. But I want to make it right. I've filed for divorce. Chloe's no longer in my life. I see now what she really is, and I see how I've treated you." I was shocked. The words were exactly what I'd wanted to hear, but I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, but another part, one that was still healing, didn't know how to let go of the past. But as I stood there in my apartment, hearing my brother finally stand up for himself, I felt something change. Maybe I had been right all along. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. "I'm sorry, Maya," he said, his voice full of regret. "I should have seen it earlier. I should have believed you. I've been a fool. And I know it's too late, but I hope you can forgive me one day." The silence hung between us for a moment. I didn't know if forgiveness would come right away, but I knew this was a start. A real start. He wasn't the brother I had once thought he was, but he was trying. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like he understood. A few days later, Ethan showed up at my apartment, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I invited him in. We talked, really talked for the first time in years. I could see the man he had become, and even though I wasn't ready to fully trust him yet, I could tell he was trying to make things right. That was enough for me to begin healing. But the biggest surprise came after that. A few weeks later, Chloe's name made the news again. This time, it was for all the wrong reasons. She was arrested for fraud and drug smuggling. The authorities had pieced everything together. The truth had finally come out. Chloe's criminal activities were exposed, and the world saw her for what she really was. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For once, I wasn't the villain. For once, Chloe had lost. And the best part was, Ethan was free of her. No longer trapped in her world of lies and manipulation. The world had finally seen through her facade, and the damage she had caused was now unraveling. As I sat there, looking at the aftermath of everything, I realized that the journey hadn't just been about exposing Chloe for the world to see. It had been about finding myself, about reclaiming my voice, my strength, and my future. Maya wasn't the overlooked daughter anymore. Maya was someone who had fought through the hardest of times and come out stronger on the other side. And now, as I looked at the possibility of rebuilding my family, I knew that it wouldn't be easy. But I was ready to face whatever came next, together with my brother, my family, and most importantly, with myself. The past couldn't be undone, but it had shaped me. And now, I was ready to move forward, no longer second in anyone's eyes, but standing tall, unafraid, and proud.